In the final years of the Triumph brand, after its once sturdy reputation for well-performing sports cars and comfortable family saloons had been soured by the likes of the TR7, a surprise deal with Honda of Japan would give rise to a last-minute shining moment for one of Britain's most renowned car marques, this coming in the form of the Triumph Acclaim. The Acclaim, though seeing sales for only 4 years and ultimately becoming Triumph's last production car, proved that it was possible, with the right mechanical and financial support, for British Leyland to create a reliable car, and today this machine is remembered as the final hurrah for Triumph before it was discontinued during 1984. Japan's influence on the European motoring scene had started in 1960 with the launch of the Daihatsu Compagno Berliner, a small family saloon that took styling and design cues from contemporary Austins and Fiats, and was the first Japanese car sold in Britain, though due to less than complimentary reviews by motoring critics, the car was considered something of a joke and would only sell 6 units in the entire United Kingdom. It wasn't until the early 1970s that Japan's influence on the British car market truly began to flourish, with the likes of the Toyota Celica and Datsun 140J proving to deliver reliability that far exceeded the likes of British rivals such as the Austin Allegro and the Morris Marina, this trend being replicated across the entire of continental Europe, with Citroën, Alfa Romeo, Fiat, Renault and Peugeot all seeing their markets undercut by Pacific metal. Desperate to stop the Japanese tide, domestic car builders turned to the European community for intervention, and thus heavy import tariffs were imposed on cars being built outside the common market, stunting the profits made by Japanese car makers. The sudden invasion of Japanese cars on the European market wasn't without merit, though, as many domestic car builders were strangled by archaic designs, poor build quality, and turbulent worker relations, the most high-profile of these being British Leyland. Still struggling after its 1975 bankruptcy and subsequent partial nationalisation, British Leyland was reaching near total collapse during the latter half of the decade, and with crippling strike action and poor build quality still miring even its most distinct models, such as the Rover SD1 and Triumph TR7, radical cutbacks and financial reorganisation was administered by no-nonsense chairman Sir Michael Edwards. It was through this that Mark Snowden, Director of Product Development at the Austin Morris division of British Leyland, proposed in 1978 that the firm should form an alliance with another car maker, as British Leyland had not the money to develop another model alone. From this, a short list of possible partners was drafted, which included Alfa Romeo, the American Motors Corporation or AMC, BMW, Chrysler in both its US and UK divisions, Fiat, Ford, General Motors, Honda, Mazda, Mercedes-Benz, Mitsubishi, Nissan, the Peugeot Citroën Group or PSA, Renault, Saab, Subaru, Toyota, Volkswagen and Volvo. Of these, Chrysler UK was the preferred choice, followed closely by Honda, with a significant amount of headway being covered under what was dubbed Project Dovetail, which would have involved a partnership, a rationalised range of factories that included Longbridge, Poissy, Cowley, Brighton, Solihull and Browns Lane, and a slimmed-down range of cars. The combined BL Chrysler range of cars would have included the Metro and Princess from British Leyland, as well as models from the Rover, Jaguar, MG and Land Rover divisions, while Chrysler would have contributed the Horizon, Alpine and C9 Tagora, though this prospective deal ultimately fell through when Chrysler's American parent company pulled out of the UK, leaving the company to be bought by PSA. Negotiations continued after the sale, but following a final meeting on September 6, 1978 between Sir Michael Edwards, David Andrews and chairman of PSA Jean-Paul Parere, it was more than evident that PSA were not interested in divesting any of its UK operations to British Leyland. The terrible fiscal state of Chrysler UK at the time of the sale meant it had little potential value. Meanwhile, serious talks with Renault had been taking place since early 1977, and by the summer of 1978, discussions had reached a point where a collaborative plan was being finalised, the intention being for Renault to offer BL the upcoming R9 model to produce in return for marketing rights for the Land Rover in Europe and the USA. However, Edwards felt that Renault viewed BL as a weaker partner, and the terms of their agreement stacked heavily in the favour of the French, the Renault 9 being the only prospective model to be marketed as a BL product in the UK, though the company would have no rights to export it anywhere else under their own name, while Renault's executives felt they should still be allowed to sell the Renault version in Britain alongside it. Regardless, Edwards had stated that he would like to have increased his cooperative links with Renault, but due to delays in the negotiation, the proceedings were never concluded, while Renault ultimately chose to partner with the American Motors Corporation on April 1, 1978, to which Edwards was only made privy to when he read of it in the Financial Times. Having failed to gain traction with the French, it became apparent that the second choice for chief executive of British Leyland, Ray Horrocks, was a partnership with Honda, and after much convincing, he was able to sway the upper management into agreeing that the Japanese company could be a suitable partner to do business with Edwards engaging in fact-finding missions to determine whether Honda was equally as interested. In response, figures from within the Japanese auto industry were positive as to Honda's potential desire to form a partnership with the British firm, and thus Sir Fred Warner, a friend of Edwards on the Chloride Company board and ex-ambassador to Tokyo, dispatched a telex to the president of Honda, Kiyoshi Kawashima, in order to consider a corporate alliance with British Leyland. Shortly after, a positive response was forthcoming, and arrangements were made to begin talks on neutral ground in San Francisco between the management teams of both companies during October 1978, with British Leyland's delegation being led by Ray Horrocks, David Andrews and John Backus. Negotiations were protracted, but made good progress, with Honda illustrating to the British Leyland team the likely product that the joint venture could be based upon, the initial meeting being followed by Mike Carver, BL's head of business strategy, flying out to Japan in early 1979 to detail more concrete plans with Honda and sound out what products they could offer and see how they would fit into the BL range. After seeing the prototype of the then yet-to-be-launched Honda Ballad, a notchback version of the second-generation Civic, Carver was pleased with what he considered to be a product that would fit nicely within the future slimmed-down range of British Leyland cars, though behind the scenes, he would have preferred Honda's offer of a hatchback model like the original Civic in order to combat the likes of the Volkswagen Golf. The relationship between the two companies' negotiating and engineering teams mirrored that between the Ballad and the BL range, as once a rapport was established, a satisfactory conclusion was rapidly found, and on Boxing Day 1979, Sir Michael Edwards flew out to Japan to meet Kiyoshi Kawashima in order to officially sign the collaborative deal between the two companies. From this, what was dubbed Project Bounty commenced, the plan being to develop the Ballad into a replacement for the Triumph Dolomite, with the Jaguar Rover Triumph or JRT division of British Leyland being employed to rework the original Honda into a machine that would appeal to European taste. Originally, production was to take place on the former Dolomite lines at Canley near Coventry, but as part of Edwards' widespread streamlining of British Leyland's operations, the JRT division was phased out in favour of the light-medium division, which meant the Acclaim could be incorporated into the Austin Morris range and be built at the underutilised Cowley factory in Oxford. Following initial market research, BL strategists became more bullish about the chances of Project Bounty's success on the British and continental markets, and as a result, the company increased its production targets for the new car, which would be marketed as the Triumph Acclaim, the saloon being designed to accommodate the upcoming Metro City car and the prospective small family hatchback that would eventually become the Maestro. Though the initial goal of Project Bounty was to provide a stopgap between the Dolomite and a more refined Japanese translation model, it quickly became apparent that the Acclaim would have the dual purpose of also replacing the Morris Ital and the Austin Allegro in the marketplace, as these two aging cars gradually saw their sales forecasts become increasingly bleak. For Ray Horrocks, he was acutely aware of the potential implications that the Honda-British Leyland collaboration deal would have, going far beyond the simple license building of the Ballad in the UK, but instead would form part of the model range after the launch of the new British middleweight cars, with production targets for the Acclaim being set at 1,500 units per week. While it could be argued that the Acclaim was simply a rebadged version of the Ballad, British Leyland were insistent that the car be as British as possible in its construction, using 80% UK-sourced parts and contributing to 70% of the X-Works price, Horrocks also considering the car's 1.3-litre engine, though initially produced in Japan, could be built in Britain if the volumes were sustainable. He also made early hints as to possibly placing the Honda engine into other BL cars, with other schemes including the HD9, a hatchback version of the Acclaim, the HD14, a small city car, and the HD17 as an executive car, though the HD9 and 14 wouldn't go beyond paper projects and were already filled in the marketplace by the Austin Metro and the upcoming Maestro. However, the HD17 would go on to form the basis of Project XX, later known as the Rover 800, with the use of the HD codename indicating that, even as early as 1981, BL were looking to Honda as a primary assistant to the development of their future models, as would be the case following the launch of the Montego in 1984 as the very last entirely British-built saloon produced by British Leyland. At the same time, though, the announcement of the Honda-British Leyland partnership and the Acclaim that was soon to follow was one that filled other European car makers with concern, with the French and Italian governments in particular beginning to raise issue with the fact that Project Bounty was, in fact, a Japanese Trojan horse that would be able to circumvent the import quotas set by the common market. Sir Michael Edwards, though, would strongly defend the Acclaim, writing a letter to the Times newspaper 1 week before the car's launch, stating that the model is the result of a unique piece of collaboration between BL and Honda, and that it was fully in line with British Leyland's business and market requirements, regardless of the stern opposition being mounted by the likes of Renault, PSA, Alfa Romeo and Fiat. In the end, despite the Acclaim being a politically volatile car, British Leyland's engineers at the newly opened Gaydon test facility were able to create a machine that had been tuned nicely to European driver tastes, while mechanically, the Acclaim owed nearly all of its componentry to the original Civic and Ballard, incorporating the same 1.3-litre engine, gearbox, and front and rear McPherson strut suspension. Though the car's 91-inch wheelbase made it exceptionally cramped for a saloon, perhaps the most notable carryover from its Japanese roots behind the mechanics, British Leyland redesigned the seats for larger European passengers and modified the interior trim and colours. On October 7, 1981, the Triumph Acclaim was launched in a manner that was comparatively quiet, with a very basic marketing and promotional campaign that was but a shadow of the enthusiasm poured into the Austin Metro a year earlier, while public opinion was that the car was a rebadged Honda, but that was no valid reason not to buy one. It was in this capacity that the Acclaim did well in winning over returning customers, who traded in their Dolomites in favour of the new car, while road testers praised the Acclaim for its good performance, excellent economy, high levels of build quality, and an appealing, engaging nature, its most notable trait being that it was very well equipped, as a clear carryover from the original Ballard, and not something endemic to British Leyland. Nevertheless, the Acclaim proved popular, reaching a peak of 2.71% of the market share during 1982, slightly below the original forecasts of 3% once it became a fully fledged Austin Morris product, though its greatest achievement was the fact that the car suffered from no reliability issues, with few rust problems and healthy, long-lasting engines. It was from this experience that British Leyland quickly learned vital lessons regarding how to improve the standard of assembly for their own cars, and additionally, what was meant to be just a stopgap model was proposed for greater things, including a potential to rework the Acclaim to meet the next-generation Ballard that was being prepared for delivery during 1984. However, as part of the ever-continuing reduction in the number of brands being maintained by British Leyland, especially as it was being prepared for privatisation under the Thatcher government, the management opted to focus instead on the Austin and Rover elements of the company, while Triumph and Morris would be axed during 1984, thus making the Acclaim the last-ever production car to wear a Triumph badge. During its 3-year production run, a total of 133,625 examples were built, and thus formed the start of a lasting and largely harmonious partnership between Honda and British Leyland, with the likes of the Rover 200, 400, 600 and 800 proving the soundness of the collaboration right up until January 1994. After this, the renamed Rover Group, as sold to British Aerospace during 1988, would see its deal with Honda shattered when the car maker was offloaded to BMW at the first opportunity, though attempts have been made to sell Rover to Honda based on their long-time partnership in the months prior to the BMW buyout, that the Japanese builder, at the very end, showed absolutely no interest in taking on the British firm. Nevertheless, the Triumph Acclaim was truly the point of reversal for British Leyland's dwindling fortunes at the end of the 1970s, and a hard lesson for the British management to accept when it came to the fact that their own domestic practices for the development and building of cars were both shambolic and completely out of tune with what customers were expecting for cars during this significant period of transition. With cars becoming more available to the public than they had been before, as per the likes of hatchbacks in the form of the Volkswagen Golf and Renault 5, a greater expectation was needed with regards to reliability and build quality, something British Leyland simply was failing to provide, thus trapping them in a vicious downward spiral that could not be broken as a single company. To this end, the Acclaim was the first step into a wider scheme that would help to revive the car maker's fortunes going into the 1980s, essentially a proof of concept that was put on sale to test the public's opinion of whether they would accept a Japanese car being built in Britain, the overwhelmingly positive response being the incentive to fundamentally alter BL's corporate direction and keep it alive just a little bit longer.